Welcome back to the daily Living Jewish Kitzur Shulchan Aruch Shir. We are now in the section of brachas, not meals and food, but brachas. This is a mistake. We learned about the brachas of Hamotzi and Bezodos, and now we're learning about the special brachas that are made on wine. Here we go. So we learned yesterday that just as bread is a king food, and that once you've made hamotzi on bread, you do not need to make a bracha on any other foods that you're eating during the meal. So the same goes for wine. When you make a bracha on wine, then that exempts you from any drinks that you'll be eating during that sit down. Number 5, he says, if you didn't actually sit down, but let's see the Hebrew over here. I'm not sure what the word's familiar with the word repast. Like kaves. But either way, if you didn't affix yourself, if you didn't sit down to have a proper meal of a proper drink of wine, but rather you just drank a little bit in a casual manner, and you didn't intend on drinking anything else after that, then you would need to make another bracha on other drinks. There's a question whether the after bracha of such wine would also cover other drinks, or would you still make this special after bracha for drinks, which would be barei nefashot. So to resolve this, if you eat anything else, eat any food whose after bracha is barei nefashos, like an apple, then when you say the barei nefashos of the apple, you'll have in mind that this will cover the other drinks as well, in case the after bracha of the wine didn't include them. Maybe before we continue, let's take a moment to just clarify the different brachas that we have learned and that we're speaking about. So in brachas, we have a bracha that's made after the meal, and there's a bracha that's made before the meal. So the brachas that are made before the meal would be, one bracha would be hamotzi, another bracha would be Bezodos, and we learned about those two brachas already. Hamotzi is on lechem, is on bread, and Bezodos is, or mezonot, is on foods made from the 5 grains, wheat, barley, etc. And then another bracha would be, the third bracha that we're learning now would be hagafen. Hagafen means barei pri hagafen, thanking Hashem for fruits of the vine. So that's a bracha that's made on wine. And then a fourth bracha, which we haven't spoken much about, would be shehakol. Shehakol niyah bidvaro. We thank Hashem for everything. Shehakol would be made on any unspecified food or drinks. So any unspecified food or drink that you drink before you eat it, you make the bracha of shakol niyah bidvaro. What do I mean by unspecified? I mean that as long as it doesn't have its own unique bracha. So any food or drink that doesn't have its own unique bracha, before eating it or drinking it, even the smallest amount, as long as you're not eating it for medicinal purposes, but you're eating it or drinking it because you're thirsty or because you're hungry or because you like the taste, then you'll make a bracha before anything you eat or drink. And these are examples of 4 brachas that you'll make before eating or drinking. So these are the brachas that come before you eat. Now, when a person finishes eating or drinking, there's another bracha that they make after they eat. So often you see pictures of medical or surgery or renovations, home design. You see the before and you see the after. They show you what it used to look like and what it looks like afterwards. So similarly, when it comes to brachas, we also have the before and after of brachas. There's a bracha that we make before we've eaten, when we're still hungry. And at that point, we are acknowledging that we're about to eat is from Hashem. And in so doing, we are like asking permission from Hashem to partake of that which really belongs to Him. And after we finish eating, now that's the after, we're a different person. We've enjoyed ourselves. We're feeling fuller. we've had nice taste in our mouths, we're feeling satiated, whatever the reason we ate or drank. So now is the second opportunity to thank Hashem for what we actually have already eaten, for that which we already appreciate. There's a similar concept when it comes to the Yom Tovim. We have two Yom Tovs that celebrate the Torah. We have one Yom Tov called Shavuos, and another Yom Tov called Simchas Torah. In both Yom Tovim, we celebrate the Torah that Hashem gave us, but they're the before and the after. Shavuos is before, as we receive the Torah, before we've actually learned anything. But the people just said, whatever it is, we'll do it. And then, so that's one type of Yom Tov. And then, Simchas Torah is after we finish reading the entire Torah, we now celebrate that which we've already learned. So Judaism, not only on for paid jobs, but for different areas of Judaism, we have the before and after, and brachas are no different. So these are examples of the before brachas, and then what would be the examples of the after brachas? So let's look at the very same foods. After eating bread, you would make the what's called birkas hamazon, or benching. But I won't call it benching because really all of these things are benching. Benching means to bless Hashem. So when you bench, you don't only bench after bread, but the birkas hamazon, I'll put in brackets, is the 4 long blessings. So that's the long one, which we would say typically after a Shabbos meal, but really anytime you've eaten bread. The second type of after bracha is after having the 5 grains. The after bracha of that is called Al Hamichya. Thank you, Hashem, for the grain that I have eaten. That's a lot shorter. It's only about a paragraph or 2. Just 1 or 2 paragraphs, as opposed to the full benching, which is several paragraphs. After drinking wine, very similar to Al Hamichya, but instead of it being Al Hamichya, it's Al Hagafen. So you see, obviously, that they correlate. I guess the Michya is a little bit different from the Zionus, but these 2 blessings, Al Hamichya and Al Hagafen, are almost identical. So it's actually called in Hebrew Me'ein Shalosh, which means it's an abbreviation of the long benching, of the first 3 blessings of the last benching. So it's like the first full blessing, but it's abbreviated version. So this is called the Me'ein Shalosh, but it's almost like and it's said for 3 different types of foods, just with a different ending. So if the food that we're eating is mezainas, grain, then the ending will be Al Hamichya. If the food that we're eating is wine, then the after bracha will be Al Hagafen. And if the food that we're eating is grapes, then there will be Al Hamichya, Al Hagafen, sorry, if the food that we're eating is the 7th species, and there's a special after bracha for that, but we'll learn about it later. And then shahakol, any food for which you would make a shahakol before you eat it, there are exceptions. The after bracha would be what's called boirei the fashois, or the fashot. So depending on how you pronounce it. So okay, here's a bit of a list. A couple of brachas that you make before food, and a couple of brachas that you make after food. So I just realized that when we're going through these halachas, I guess it's important to have this clear so we actually know what we're talking about. And what we just learned about most recently was that if you say a bracha on the wine, Al Hagafen, then there would be no need to make any bracha on any drinks. Meaning you will skip out a bracha shahakol. Even though usually when you have a cup of water, you would make a bracha shahakol. And the bracha on wine is not shahakol. But since wine is a king drink, when you make that bracha hagafen on the wine, it also includes all other drinks. And the same would go for hamotzi. Although the bracha on an apple is not hamotzi, since bread is a staple food eaten together with lots of other foods, or let's just take another example, cucumber. Once you make the bracha on the bread of hamotzi, you will not need to make a bracha on the cucumber. So that's what we just spoke about over here. And the last point he mentioned, though, was that if you just had a sip of wine without intending to drink anything else, so if you do go ahead afterwards and you have a cup of water, you will make a separate bracha on that cup of water. However, the question is, will you need to make a separate after bracha on that cup of water? Or perhaps the after bracha that you make on the wine will actually include the water as well. Because it's when you make the after bracha on the wine, you've already drunk the water. So maybe it will be included or maybe not. So he says what you should do is eat, if you're having a cup of water, also have anything else that has the same after blessing of berei nefashot. So if you had a cup of water, have a chocolate or have a mushroom. A mushroom is not a vegetable, believe it or not. A mushroom can grow not just out of the ground, it can grow out of anything. It just typically grows in the ground. So the bracha on a mushroom actually isn't the bracha made on vegetables, but we'll learn about that a bit later. So that's what we were just studying about, that if you are making a bracha, if you just had some wine and then you have another drink, and you're not sure whether to make the after blessing on the other drink, since you didn't intend to eat the other drink, then you can eat some other food. It may sound a little bit complicated, and that's fine. You can understand it to the best of your ability. But hopefully, if you're not catching everything, then you're catching some of the principles, which is how brachas operates. Back to the text.
John, did you write?
If you're I saved it, so I'm happy to send it to anybody afterwards, or maybe I could post it on the. I'm not going to post it on the group because I don't want to bombard it, but I'll PM you if you'd like it. If you recite Kiddush over wine and intend to drink whiskey or coffee afterwards, there's a question if they're exempted in the bracha made over the wine. Okay, yeah. Many authorities say it's not a problem because, as we said, wine covers all drinks. Some people say that the bracha on wine does not cover the bracha on whiskey. So what do? You want to drink the whiskey. You can't make a bracha if you don't need to make the bracha, because then you'll be eliciting Hashem's name in vain. But you don't want to drink something that requires a bracha without a bracha. So he says, have a packet of sugar, have a candy, make a bracha shakol diyabid varo on the candy. And when you make the bracha on the candy, that way, at this point, you definitely covered to have the whiskey, because whichever way you look at it, you're fine. If the bracha on the whiskey was included in hagafen, then the bracha on the candy was just on the candy. And if the whiskey was not included in the kiddush, then it was included in the bracha you made on the candy. But I'm not sure how necessary this is. As I said, as he says, there are different opinions about that. Okay, the final few halachos. When you say a bracha over wine during the meal, and there are other people present, you should first catch their attention. Say, Sabri Baranan or Sabri Rabotai. Pay attention, rabbis, so that they could listen to the bracha. He doesn't say so that they could answer Amen. Because during a meal, we don't want people to answer Amen because it could cause them to choke. So this is the idea of when we make Kiddush Friday night. Before we say the bracha on the wine, we first say, Sabri Baranan, or Rabbanan v'Ravotai. Listen up, we are about to make the bracha on the wine. So we want everybody to listen when we make a bracha on wine. I did not get a chance to look up why that is, so I have some homework for myself as well. If a group was drinking one kind of wine, so here's where we take the whole thing to a new level. What we're going to see over here is that wine has not just one bracha, but wine actually there's a second bracha that could be made on wine. And this is for if you're having a really special wine. So you've already made the bracha on wine at the beginning of the meal, and now somebody brings out another really fancy wine. And wow, this is good wine. This is not the average. So guess what? Just like you need to thank the host, you need to thank Hashem too. So when you're about to enjoy a special wine during a meal, there's a special bracha to be made, which nowadays it's not done so commonly because we need to make sure it's really that special and we don't want to say Hashem's name in vain. But certainly it could and should be done where appropriate. So let's see that inside. Everybody was drinking wine by the table and somebody else brought out some other type of wine. Then they do not need to make a second bracha of hagafen, but they do make a special bracha called hatoiv v'hameitiv. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, hatoiv v'hameitiv. Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the world, who is good and does good. In other words, this is really good wine. Hashem, thanks for the wine. You're awesome, you're good, and you make good. You've just made some really good wine. So we're not just thanking the winery and the host, but we're thanking Hashem for this really good wine. If they brought a third kind of wine, then you can make a second bracha of hatoiv v'hameitiv over that. Even if many wines are brought out. We learned this from the conduct of Rebbe, one of the sages in the Talmud. This is not talking about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. We're talking a couple of hundred years back to Rebbe, who authored the Mishnah, who was actually a very wealthy rabbi. And he would make a bracha over every new jug of wine that was opened. Practically speaking, I would still warn you to err on the side of caution. You'd rather not make that bracha than make it unnecessarily. So be sure that it is something new, it's novel, it's special, and then you would be able to make that special bracha. Okay. If they reconsidered, now when he says reconsider, this is a whole discussion where once a person decides definitively that they're done eating or definitely done eating, meaning once a person decides that they will no longer be eating anymore, and that's set in stone, if you are to continue eating, you will need to make another bracha. So that would be over here as well. If you had actually already finished drinking wine and you intended not to drink anymore, and then you changed your mind and decided to drink some more, then you would actually make two brachas: the regular bracha on wine, and the second of Boyer Pri Hagafen, and the second bracha for special wine, which is hatoiv v'hameitiv. And now we'll see that there are a number of conditions that need to be met in order for a person to be able to make the special bracha on special wine. And so he starts, the bracha hatoiv v'hameitiv is only said when there is another person with you who is also drinking from both wines. As it says in the bracha, he is good to the person and he does good. So we're talking about a relationship with two people involved. So this special bracha will not be able to be said if you're drinking the special wine alone. However, if two people are both about to enjoy a special wine, then you would make the bracha together. So this is a special bracha that can only be said as a team. When a guest eats at the table of his host, and the host places the wine bottle on the table so that whoever wishes may drink, as is done at lavish feasts like a Purim party, then the wine is considered as communal property, and the bracha hatoiv v'hameitiv may be said because it's already a group drinking. Even if you don't have somebody to drink right now at the same time as you, since it's a lavish feast and lots of people are eating and drinking, so you would be able to make that bracha. But if the host doles out a cup of wine to each guest individually, then hatoiv v'hameitiv is not said, because then it's not a team. It's not everybody drinking together. It's rather each person's special almost gift from the host, special drink that the host has gifted him with. Okay, we'll stop over here because the time is 5:20. Please God, a few more halachas, and tomorrow we should conclude. We're almost done. Maybe we could do it super quick. If you need to go, I understand. So we can start a new section tomorrow. So one person can make the bracha on behalf of everybody, and you should first catch their attention by saying Savri Maradan. And then once he catches their attention, they'll stop eating so they won't choke, and they can answer Amen. Provided each person has his own glass in front of him so they can all drink at the same time. So this bracha of hatoiv v'hameitiv, the special bracha, the special wine, can be made by one person on everybody's behalf, as long as everybody will be drinking at the same time. And one final halacha: if you are benching over a glass of different wine, you need not say the bracha of Atayv HaMeitiv over it because you will have fulfilled your obligation with Atayv HaMeitiv said in benching. Very interesting. So if you use a cup of wine for benching, since benching itself includes the words Atayv HaMeitiv, he is good and does good within the benching, therefore you would not need to make that bracha again when you finish benching because it was already included within the benching itself. So that's as far as the special bracha on wine or the special brachos on wine. Thank you so much for joining. Please God, tomorrow we will move on to the next section.